Hi there, welcome back to Flat's Kitchen. There's nothing nicer on a Sunday morning than delicious freshly baked scones, and it's hugely popular in my home, and I serve it with some homemade butter and some homemade jam. Now the best scone recipe I've ever gotten is a recipe out of any Bell's Baking Bible, worthwhile book, and I make the recipe exactly as it is in the book. The only difference is instead of adding milk, I add some homemade buttermilk. Now, to make things easier, what I usually do is I measure out my dry ingredients the night before and I put them in my food processor. Making your scones in the food processor is by far the best method of making scones. Because you're making it in here and you're not touching it, the butter doesn't melt. As soon as you start working the dough with your hands and mixing the butter in with your hands, then you lose the delicious consistency that you want in a scone because your hands are warm. So I pop all my dry ingredients, I measure them out the night before, I pop them into my food processor. The next morning all I do is I add my butter, I add my eggs and my milk, and I blend it all together, roll it out and press out my scones. Right, so I've already measured out 500 grams of all-purpose flour, and then what I'm going to add then in addition to this is I need 75 grams of icing sugar or confectioner's sugar or powdered sugar, and I'm going to add 75 grams. Now this is obviously going to be a sweet scone. And then the other dry ingredient that's very important is I'm going to be adding baking powder, and it requires 25 grams of baking powder. So together the icing sugar and the baking powder make up 100 grams. So we basically have 600 grams in total for our dry ingredients. And then of course just a pinch of salt, which I had here somewhere. There we go. And a pinch of salt. Now, once I transfer this over to my food processor, then I just blitz it a little bit to combine all the dry ingredients together. So tomorrow morning, I will finish up my scones. Right, so I want to serve some delicious, freshly baked scones for my Sunday morning brunch. And yesterday I weighed out my dry ingredients and just pulse them up a little bit to make sure that they're mixed. I've chopped up 125 grams of butter so long. Now it's a little bit pale. It's because it's homemade. It doesn't have all the coloring that the store-bought butter has. This one is unsalted, but I've made this recipe using salted butter as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let while the machine runs, I'm going to throw in the butter. Right, so the mixture looks like breadcrumbs. The butter's nicely incorporated, and then with the machine running again, I'm going to pour in 2 beaten eggs. And then what we're going to do is you can use milk or you can use buttermilk. I'm going to add buttermilk slowly to the mixture with the machine running until the mixture comes together. Not quite sure. Okay, so there's no fixed amount of milk that you add. You simply just add milk until the mixture comes together. You can see, you can squeeze it, and we have a nice soft dough. So this is when you can now continue. I've got some flour still that's not incorporated, so I'm just going to whiz it around a little bit more. what I do then is I just turn this out onto a lightly floured surface, and I don't even use a rolling. Okay, so I'm basically just going to, as little as possible, handle the dough, just flatten it out to about a 2 centimeter thickness. Let me just check and see that it's not sticking to the bottom. Okay, so I've spread it out. I'd say it's about 2 centimeters thick, and using a cookie cutter, I'm just going to go around and cut out my scones. And I'm placing them onto a baking sheet. You can see we like rather big scones. Oops, but you can, select any size cookie cutter that you like to cut out your scones. Right, so I'm just taking the remnants of my dough that I had from cutting out these 6, and I'm going to press it out again, and I only do this once. You want to work your scone dough as little as possible, else you're just going to end up with a really tough scone that you could probably just throw at somebody. So there is some wastage of the dough that I normally throw away, simply because I don't want to compromise on the texture. Okay, you can pack them quite closely on the cookie sheet because they don't really spread. Mine are not perfectly shaped. And then you're going to give them an egg wash. Mine is just milk. You can give it an egg wash, but I'm just using milk. You just want to brush the tops of your scone with a bit of milk. And then you're going to pop it into an oven, 200 degrees Celsius. And you're going to bake it for between 12 and 15 minutes. It all depends on the size of your scone. If you cut out small scones, you're probably only going to bake it for about 12 minutes. You just let it put in the oven for 10 minutes and then check on it and see until they're nice and golden brown on top. Finally, breakfast is served. Some delicious freshly baked scones. Lovely golden brown on the top. You can see the characteristic crack in the middle. Not all perfectly shaped, but tasty nonetheless. I'm going to be serving my breakfast scones with some whipped cream, some freshly made berry jam and homemade butter. Nice large helping. If you were going to serve these for tea, you could cut them smaller. Thank you so much for watching, and I can guarantee you, you follow this recipe, you follow this method, you're going to get delicious scones.